there's a lack of communication, especially to the public, on the why.
If you are a witness, things can happen to you.
You cannot use the compensations to settle the case. We don't want money.
Some very strong statements made by the family. Hello everyone, welcome to Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. My name is Amalina Kamal.
And I'm Hazween Hassan. 16 years on, a case that has haunted Malaysia's conscience is back in the spotlight. The Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission has at long last issued a formal apology to the family of Teoh Beng Hock for his death during a probe by the MACC. MACC Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki on Wednesday issued a statement and said the Commission deeply regrets Teoh's death and that it had a profound impact on the family, the MACC and the nation. On behalf of the Commission, Azam says, I extend our deepest sympathies and apologise to the family of the late Teoh Beng Hock. And that's not all. The Commission is also prepared to offer a goodwill contribution to support Teoh's child, especially for education and welfare needs.
Now, at the time of the particular incident, Teoh was just 30 years old. He died in 2009 after giving a statement to MACC officers at their Selangor office. Now, his body was found the next morning at the Plaza Masalam building, and over a decade, his family has waited not just for justice, but for the truth. And in addition to the formal apology, Azam also acknowledged the findings of all previous investigations, one of which include the 2011 Royal Commission of Inquiry, as well as the 2014 Court of Appeal ruling on the most recent police probe, which was classified as no further action by the Attorney General's chambers. Now, although no one has been charged, Azam said that MACC does take the matter seriously.
He points to reforms the Commission has rolled out since: body-worn cameras, upgraded CCTVs, video interview rooms, even iron grills for added security during interviews.
And perhaps the most important one to note is the PEACE model: planning, engage, account, closure, as well as evaluation. Now, it's meant to guide how investigations are conducted, a structure, as they say, to reduce harm and improve transparency. But one question here remains, whether or not the apology and goodwill gesture will be enough to offer Teoh's family.
And to help us discuss this, we're joined in the studio today by C4 Centre CEO Pushpan Murugiah. Pushpan, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back. It's been a while.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you, especially for this particular topic. It's not necessarily looking into corruption directly, but I suppose the results of having certain loopholes within the system and resulting it into having a death incident, right? I want to look into the particular apology that Tan Sri Azam Baki had put out. How do you personally feel about that?
For me, to accept any apology or whatever compensation the government is giving to the family is for the family to decide on their own. But personally, I feel that it's 16 years too late. That there was a death in custody in your ministry or in your institution. At that time also, there should be urgency in trying to sort the issue out, making sure people are accountable. There should be that kind of urgency in your institution. 16 years later, giving apology, whether it's sincere or not, is difficult to say after 16 years.
Mm-hmm. But how can we actually genuinely assure that the public is properly safeguarded, right? Especially when they are called for as a witness here.
Yeah, correct. Since then, there are claims that there are improvements, but I still feel the assurance is lacking. Let me give you some examples. 2 years after Teoh Beng Hock's case, we had another death as well. Ahmad Sharbani Muhammad was also died 2 years after the particular case. So, which means that that kind of situation arised again after a particular issue of death. Now, going back 2 years, the case of Syed Sadiq, there was a judgment in Court of Appeal. We all know that, right? What was more scary for us was it was mentioned by the judgment itself that there are instances where MACC used force or even threatened physical harms to witnesses. The defense witness, even the prosecution witness. So if you put all those things together, it gives a very negative narrative that public will have to be fearful if you ever get called to MACC.
The idea of thuggery is taking...
Thuggery is there. And whether you, now the question now is whether will you be safe? You know, whether if you are a witness, things can happen to you. So how can you assure that I will be safe when I'm going down there? But I think we also need to look at the perception now. Why I want to raise it up is because you talk about all the small reforms, procedural changes you have made in order to stop this kind of issues. But you have still a massive perception, negative perception against the institution. What are you going to do that, along with all the other changes, to improve the negative perception? Because now people are fearful. So will people come and give witness statements to you? Will they want to come and share information with you? They don't, because that fear factor is going to be there. So that perception also has to be addressed as well, I think.
Can we go into the specific reforms that Tan Sri himself mentioned about the CCTV, the peace model, as well as the visitor interview rooms? Since it has been implemented, how do you think these specific reforms were effective?
Okay, snapshot-wise, okay, I have body cam, I have CCTV rooms, you can record the proceedings. But by Azam Bakir just stating that we have all this now, how does it prevent future cases of like Teoh Beng Hock case? How does it prevent it? What kind of access that we have to extract those information? Must we go through a court? Can public access those videos or that interviews? Of course, investigation, you have different procedures. But that boils down to when you say something in response to something, you need to explain how it's going to prevent the issues you're talking about. And second thing, what about your procedures where someone switches off the webcam? Where somebody erases the recording of the interview, or where somebody forgotten to switch on the record function. So what is your procedure to prevent all that? What is your assurance that that will not happen? So I mean, putting it out there, or we have this, therefore everything is okay, I think it's not accurate, it's not complete. You need to explain what procedure you have, what is your disciplining procedures. If someone switches off the webcam, what are those kind of assurance that we can get from him? So I think that is more important if you want to get perception from the people that we are doing something right.
Perhaps to address this, to have an independent commission or body or agency to be present during these interviews when the MACC is taking statements from people, witnesses?
No, I think we have to separate that conversation into two parts. One is the oversight of the institution, which I think will be discussed later. But you're talking about having an independent, I mean, it's a good idea. It can be done. You have different modalities which you can use to safeguard the interests of the witness and also the person giving the question. So you can have that procedure, but that has to be laid out. That has to be explained to the public that these are things that will help to prevent death in custody, witness death, or threatening of witnesses. If you explain that way, what you're putting in place, how it prevents it, then I think people can accept it more readily. Now it's going to be, okay, you have, so what? You can switch it off. You can put it behind the door and do things nobody will never know. Nobody has oversight whatever they're doing inside there, is among themselves.
So, genuine question here. Existingly, does the MACC go through a process of an independent audit?
Okay. You actually have, which I'll come again later, about the 5 institutions that they have within MACC. And one of it looks at some of the procedural requirements. They do have an advisory function. Okay, you should improve this. But whether there is actual audit on MACC, I don't think so. Even if there is, it's opaque. I don't know who they report to, but what I know is report to Prime Minister. Okay, there is one document they submit to one of the agencies within the 5 agencies to be given to the Prime Minister, which is supposed to be also tabled and discussed in Parliament. But I don't think that happens. So in that context, there is no way to know what's happening behind closed doors in MACC. As far as I know, I don't have access to those information. I also just want to add a little bit more on the oversight mechanism, because at this point in time, wherever we go, I would like to use the term MACC is, not only me, a few people use the word that they're untouchables, because apparently there is no oversight over MACC. If you look at when EAC was established, they tried to actually extend the scope to cover MACC. but some or other MACs have wiggled away out of it, you know. But even now, when we try to bring accountability or an oversight mechanism over the MACC, there's always a pushback saying that, oh, we don't need all this because we already have 5 mechanisms within our MACC Act. Now, I just want to draw a quick attention. Very quickly, there are 5 mechanisms, but the problem is all those 5 mechanisms do not play an oversight role. They are technically an advisory role. They have no power investigations, they have no power of compelling anything, and they are also appointed through a process where the chief commissioner gets involved and the prime minister gets involved. So even then, that 5 oversight is not independent. So I want to draw the attention that when anyone says MACC has got 5 mechanisms, so we should leave them alone. I think we should actually understand the role of the 5 and make sure that we have another oversight mechanism that look after the whole MACC. One example could be ombudsman. You know, let ombudsman have a first-tier oversight over MACC issues. I think that is also a good way of putting under another body that looks at oversight mechanism. I mean, I'm going to raise that issue at this point in time. Yeah.
Okay.
So we understand that, yeah.
Okay. Very interesting that you mentioned that it was previously supposed to be AIC's responsibility. So to what extent can that be, revisited?
I think it's close at this point in time. So the other option that we have now is to actually push for ombudsman. Government has agreed that they're going to establish an ombudsman every year. Okay, we take them. Hopefully this year it comes true, lah. But I think that is an opportunity for us to say, look, ombudsman now should have a scope of extension towards MACC as well, because there is no any other oversight mechanism over the MACC. Police got IPCC. Although IPCC is really watered down, I don't know whether it's effective or not, but at least they have an oversight mechanism.
Right.
MACC doesn't have. So we need to have one body that's truly independent to have some sort of oversight over their activity as well. I mean, they cannot investigate, the ombudsman cannot investigate corruption cases, but they can have oversight over the procedure, how they do their work, the transparency and all that. So I think that's important for us to raise the issue as well.
Yes. Now, I mean, we know that the family themselves isn't accepting the particular apology as well as the compensation because emotions are evidently still high, especially with years worth of pain and suffering and basically questions left unanswered. Now, in a press conference they did yesterday on July 16th, they called the apology insincere, more of a public relations sort of move tied to the anniversary than a genuine act of accountability. Now, these are some very strong statements made by the family. Whether or not it's a PR move, that's still alleged, that's still up for, Tan Sri Azam Baki himself to kind of counter or not.
Right, Amalina. I suppose we can imagine what the family is going through right now. And his sister in particular, Lee Lan, was clear. Without responsibility or legal consequences, the apology, she says, means very little. And the Attorney General's offer of compensation and an additional apology, well, she called it disgraceful. The family rejected that outright. They've always said that this was never about money. It was always about justice.
Right, and driving the point home further, they've even offered to raise the 3.3 million ringgit themselves as a symbolic challenge to the idea that compensation could never ever replace a life lost. Now, we do have a snippet from the conference, so let's take a look.
SPRM today apologized without any action taken against all these officers. So their apologize is meaningless. And then the offer given by them is very ashamed to us because it's a murder case. You cannot use the compensations to settle the case. We don't want money. So we play the same scenario to the SPRM. Give us the 5 officers' lives. We pay a compensation to them. Each one get 660,000 as a compensation, and we will get the public fundraising also to pay the Sumbangan Ihsan. That is the scenario we play back to the SPRM.
No, it's okay. I think we don't want to explain further. What does it mean? Serahkan nyawa. You can post the question to the Azam Baki.
Now, coming back from that particular statement that was made by Lee Lan, right? It's clear that they want prosecution, or at least the 5 officers that were tied to the particular case, be prosecuted lah, in that sense. But in this particular discourse, or at least situation, right, what sort of, I suppose, procedural misconduct or at least negligence in connection to the case, or maybe others, that we can really look into to ensure that MACC does not just get by without having to answer for their accountability?
Yeah, I think the key word here is accountability, whether we want to address the persons involved and get them accountable. Now, I did some bit of background check before I come in. So shortly after the case of Teoh Beng Hock, the cabinet actually transferred the implicated officers to other functions. So it wasn't MACC, the cabinet. And then after about 2 years, when the RCI came out, only then MACC suspended 3 out of the 5 officers. Okay? Then when later on AG actually clear all of them. So my question is, we always have this problem in Malaysia. When there's investigations or there's prosecutions of particular enforcement agencies, can be MACC or police, the key word always, we have transferred them. We have moved them around. But we never explain, okay, what happens to them.
Okay.
Whether are they transferred with the same pangkat or with the same salary, the pension fund, is it still there? So we need to be transparent what we do in this kind of instances. We are not, we never transparent in these kind of instances.
Right. But do you think by being transparent is also enough? Because again, evidently by his sister, right? The push here is to have the punishment to be more severe, or at least that is implied. So how can we ensure the justice system does not take sides in this case, or at least be reactive?
Yeah, I think again it boils down to a bigger ecosystem, because I think you're looking at judiciary itself in these instances, they are quite independent in cases like this. Because they are based on facts and things like that. But I think the whole ecosystem where you have an enforcement agency that is opaque and there's no oversight behind them is extremely difficult to get any form of accountability, information, or data to go after them. You know, so when you don't have that kind of structure to get anybody accountable, prosecuting is one thing. Even getting them to be accountable in their own actions is a difficult activity by itself. So I think we have to look at the whole system. We need to address the whole reform where the institution itself has to be looked at. The bigger ecosystem of accountability and prosecution and AG powers also have to be looked at as well. So I think it's not just one particular instance here, but it's the entire ecosystem that sustained this kind of problem over the many years. Yeah.
Well, the latest development on the case, as we all know, is that the Attorney General's Chambers has said no further action, right?
Yeah.
And to be fair to the current administration, MACC administration now, with Tan Sri Azam Baki at the helm, he wasn't required to issue an apology in the first place. So that's one. So do you think now with the NFA, the MACC is still compelled to reopen internal disciplinary reviews to address institutional accountability here?
No, I think that they should have, I would definitely agree for them to have initiate a process internally as well to clear up whatever lingering issues, data, information that is missing, and to make sure that it's transparently done. Because you now have a situation where 16 years case is still ongoing. Public trust is massively down, is low. People don't trust your institution. You need to do whatever you can to gain some trust or some goodwill back from the public by doing proper internal investigations, opening up files, making people understand they are really doing some stuff. At this point in time, I don't see that activity. I don't see that sincerity in trying to really address those issues. Yes, Azam Baki wasn't involved in the initial stages of it, but as an institution, he is the head of the institution. So I think he also bears that responsibility of making sure that the institution's integrity, the position of MACC should improve, should become better with the public eye. So he must do what he can to address this issue as well.
As for Tan Sri Azam Baki's particular move in terms of issuing out the public apology, we do have Datuk Sri Dr. Jaharuddin Muhammad Yunus, who's the founder for Rapera Movement and a senior lawyer. He did say that the apology tendered by Azam himself is seen as a good initiative because he's not legally obliged to do so. However, he does mention that he hopes that other agencies would follow the move here. What does that mean?
I'm not too sure the context of other agency moves, but I just want to maybe challenge a little bit on the premise of there is no legal obligation. I think many instances of wrongdoing or maybe misbehaving of officers or whatever is been classified or is legally not inclined to say anything or not inclined to do it that way, but he's doing just because it's good. I think that should be a culture that we have. If your institution has something that is not correct or people perceive as something that is not properly done, I think it's incumbent upon you to have a good culture to say things like this. This is wrong, I agree, we apologize. It cannot be every interaction with the public has to be legally based. Has to be, because the law says I don't have to do this, I don't have to do this. But then you don't get the trust, you don't get that conversation, the empathy with the public, that these are major issues. I feel you, but I have got legal issues to matter, but let's converse, let's talk. Feel my pain and I feel your pain. So that is what we want, that culture of engagement, I think we need to emphasize. If you can't say, he just is something good because he didn't have to be in the first place.
Right.
Does the MACC now have a perception crisis? Is this the first thing that they have to rectify here?
Yeah, I think so. C4 has always said that there are two issues that Malaysia face. One is there is a massive institutional issue and structural defect. Okay. The second, I think personally more important, is the perception of the institution itself. MACC is very low in the trust barometer. Okay. Now that is why whatever they do now, there are critics. Even if they're doing it correctly, even if they follow all procedures in this case, they will still be criticized because that trust deficit or that perception of negativity of the institution is very high. Example, every time they prosecute
High profile.
first thing is selective prosecution.
Right.
So you don't change that by following the letter of the law, by doing extra to engage the community and the public.
Yeah, and to be fair to MACC, I suppose we need to give them a few credit though. They have been, very active or proactive in combating graft, right?
Yeah.
Now with cases like this, it's just very shameful that whatever efforts they've done over the years has fallen back into that barometer you just mentioned.
Yeah, correct. Just add a bit more further. I think I do have the knowledge. MNC officers are doing a good job going after graft. You mentioned the word graft. Bribery cases. They're working hard. There's no doubt about that. Okay. But what we are more concerned about when you deal with highly powerful people who are connected politically, that's where the structural defect becomes a major issue. So you need to manage both. We have the knowledge they do good job on the ground. We know officers, they're really hardworking. But we also need to acknowledge there is a defective institution out there that need to be reformed as well before the public can have full confidence in the whole institution.
Right.
I'd just like to circle back to what you mentioned a little bit earlier, saying, where there's a lack of explanation or clarity on when there is misconduct and investigations have been carried out, and then these people involved are transferred or posted somewhere else. There's a lack of communication, especially to the public, on the why, right? And again, I just came back from the International Conference on Governance and Integrity on the 15th of July this week. And, one of the speakers there echoed the same thing. In fact, I'll quote her directly. She says that the first thing that always comes to mind when there's a trust deficit is the need to manage expectations, because she says what you often see in the media and what the media amplifies is arrest, arrest, arrest. And people on the street think these people are definitely going to jail. And then she pointed out that the possible outcomes in this case must be presented and communicated, and that there are many levels to go through or that must happen before a decision is finalized. And the person who's saying this was Datuk Shirin Muhyiddin.
Okay.
Right. She's actually on the board of directors of Media Prima. So I think it's interesting that both of you, pointed out the exact same thing.
Yeah. I think because it is a concern. Every time we have investigation of a police officer or MSC officer, the first thing that comes out, they have been suspended or transferred. When you use the word things like that, people need to know what's happening next, whether there are genuine action taken or is just to cover up. You must bear in mind, even the police themselves don't really have an oversight mechanism that is proper. They only have IPCC, which I don't think is working at this point in time yet. But that mechanism has to be explained. Why are you doing? What are you doing? People can see that there is action taken. That invisible part of the whole process is what people start thinking about what could have happened. Suspicion comes in. The thought, oh no, that's not just cover up. That kind, you don't want to allow that to come into the conversation. So you need to show, what you've been doing. How many times have you ever heard that? Okay, arrested, he's been put in jail, he's been suspended, no pay, he's been removed. It's very little we hear that kind of outcome.
It's almost like a default setting.
Correct.
Right.
Default.
Do you think that also would impede MACC's progress, though? Because trying to address certain, situations or, I suppose, conflicts case by case like that, right? Because you have to see the bigger picture of it all, having to resolve things in a more forward approach.
No, I agree. Investigations, you need to have some form of secrecy in terms of information gathering and all that. Fair enough. But the outcome can be explained. What has happened to this case? What actions we took? What data was pointing towards what direction? So the outcome has to be there. You have to say, he has been released because we found this. So, there is closure. There is information given. Now, the culture of secrecy, of not sharing information, is also one of the faults. You don't share information. How do people understand a situation if there is no sharing of information?
Is it because the case of why Teoh Beng Hock was called to begin with for giving statements is still ongoing? Do you think that is one of the reasons why?
No, but after 16 years?
Okay.
You can argue that the investigation was ongoing. That you still have the need to ensure information not leaked out. Yeah, I agree. But after that, you find no action. Of course, anybody will say that something is wrong.
Right.
16 years too late.
Yeah.
Well, now we're going to move away from the discussion on Teoh Beng Hock, but still on structural reforms within our current institution, particularly on a particular topic that has been, making headlines for the past few weeks, judicial appointments. Now, we've had that particular 2 episodes ago. The government now has set to be reviewing the judicial appointments process to address public confusion as well as concern. Now, this was addressed by Minister in the Prime Minister Department's office, which is Datuk Sri Amalina herself at that particular conference that you just mentioned. Basically, it's just to manage public perception right now.
It is. And I think the conference comes very timely, where we are at a crossroads here, talking about the JAC, judiciary appointment, and now the anniversary of the untimely death of Teoh Beng Hock. So at that conference, she said, Datuk Sri Amalina said a special committee will be formed to examine the structure and process of the Judicial Appointments Commission, the JAC, despite it having overseen 5 Chief Justice appointments since 2009 without issue. Following this, the Sultan of Selangor, Sultan Sharifuddin Idris Shah, has emphasized that the appointment of senior judges to the Superior Court must comply with all legal provisions, particularly under Article 122B of the Federal Constitution. This was among the matters that Sultan Sharifuddin emphasized while chairing the 269th meeting of the Conference of Rulers yesterday. So, on the back of this, right, Pushpan, how crucial is public trust in the judiciary at this juncture? And what would C4 like to see in terms of concrete safeguards to ensure appointments are based purely on merit and integrity, not political expediency?
Yeah, let me just maybe touch on the issue of the public trust. I think why there is such a hoorah or backlash from the Bar Council, from C4 and many other organizations is because we need to always remember judiciary is our last bastion of defense, in the sense that they are the only one now that can provide a check and balance on the executives. And we all know the executive in our format, in our Westminster program system, the Prime Minister is extremely powerful. So we need to have a judiciary that's not only independent, but also seen to be independent. Now, Even now, there's many whispers about, there are certain elites, they can maneuver themselves to get certain judges. I mean, those are whispers. So when there are whispers, and when you have an opportunity where the process has been a little bit more changed in a sense, or delayed, you allow people to fill that gap that, okay, already whispers are there. Why is there delay now in pushing the JAC's recommendations to the king? That creates an opportunity for, okay, something is on. The suspicion creeps. Now, the danger of that is when there is suspicion and the public perception becomes negative on a judiciary, that's even more dangerous than the actual fault itself. Because now when public feel that, I can't get anything proper out of the judicial system, what are the alternative mechanisms that I will have to get justice? So that context, we need to always ensure that whatever said and done, the judicial system must be independent and must be seen to also be independent. In this particular instance, the way the government is approaching the system as though it's just a procedural matter, I think that's a wrong perception, a wrong approach, because it's a fundamental part of our institution. You need to address it immediately. Then now you put the whole institutions in a limbo or in a doubt or a perception that is not good for the institution.
Mm-hmm.
I think in that context, we need to address it. We need to make sure the government is aware that the implications are so high, they need to step in and get it right properly.
But when we look into JAC itself, right, because in the last discussion, we also were talking about the functions of JAC and to what extent is it actually effective. And from their level straight to the Agong, how can that be made more streamlined, right? Having to push away the executive entirely or not? For C4 sake, what's your opinion on this?
Okay, I think C4 is always, we are consistent in our call. We don't want any institutions to have the potential of influence by any executives. Now, Malaysia, we have a system where the political structure is so suited for a prime minister where he can control a lot of things. So whether he's doing good or doing bad, he will never get the benefit of the doubt. So we want even this process here, JAC, I mean, if you can eliminate that process of the prime minister, executive, I think we are all for it. But we all have to sit down and discuss a modality or a reform or agenda to how to streamline that whole process. Because I can't say, okay, we want this, we can't. Mm-hmm. It has to go through a proper legal argument, legal debate. You must get involved of the stakeholders. So, I mean, it's a bigger conversation. But C4 has always maintained that any institution of public interest or importance, you must make sure the executive don't play, or at least a minimal role in their function and the appointment process. That's where we stand.
What do you think about, when JAC was introduced back in 2009, it happened so without any constitutional amendments. So do you think it can only work and be more transparent that with amendments made to the Constitution?
Okay, I think it's interesting, this question, because to have legal basis or safety of the legal protection, a constitutional amendment is always good. But I also want to emphasize another portion. In Malaysia, we need to look at also a cultural shift or mindset shift. In this instance, within the relationship between the executive and the judiciary, and the executive and parliament, we need to shift their mindset that they must always understand that there are three separate branches. There should not be any control. They must ensure that the judiciary is independent. That mindset and that ability to understand the separation of powers and the reforms is crucial, even if you want to make any kind of constitutional amendments, because that amendments will rely on a progressive thinking parliament or executives who want to see progress in this kind of good governance aspect or compliance aspect. So I think that is the important aspect. Cultural shift in mindset. Even public, we need to understand the importance of the separation of powers. That the Prime Minister is not everything. He is there to help facilitate all kinds of reform, movement, country, national interest. But you need to allow all the three different branches to work. Now, I'm not in support of RFC per se, but this is a good example of how backbenchers can play a very powerful role in pushing for reforms. It is a good way of how Parliament can act and behave. It cannot be always opposition or government, and you align yourself that
Right.
way, and then nothing happens. Backbenchers play a powerful role if they use their role properly. This is what the culture shift you want to see.
Okay,
Yeah.
very insightful discussion that we have had thus far. I'm sure we'll be circling back to this because some developments are still ongoing. Some developments have not seen, closure yet. But I do want to thank our guest, Pushpan Murugiah from C4 Centre. Thank you so much,
Thank you so
Pushpan, for
much.
being here on Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you.
Yes. And to our audience, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell because you'll not only get Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news report will be delivered to you. Now, Hazween, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure.
My name is Amalina Kamal, and I'll see you next week.